That router went down as soon as we plugged it in, so just letting him run off how he's doing.
All right, everybody, we are live. Welcome to another episode of the Unapologetic Apologists. I'm very excited to introduce my next guest. His website is drdino.com. The YouTube channel is Kent Hovind Official. You can follow him on Twitter at Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, I think I've been following you for about 8 years now.
Okay.
When I first started getting to apologetics, you were one of the main guys I watched. And funny enough, I've gotten quite a lot of guff from atheists and Christians for having you on. I don't know why. But here's the thing. I don't necessarily have to agree on everything, but I think it's important to get as much information out there as possible.
Sure.
Let you make your case. Get different views, different people with different views on, and then the audience can make up their own mind.
Yeah.
So I guess for starters, maybe tell us a bit about your background, how you came to where you are now, how you came to be a Christian, then what made you get into apologetics.
Well, I was raised in East Peoria, Illinois, born in '53, and my dad was an engineer at Caterpillar Tractor Company, and my mom was a public school teacher. My older brother became a mechanical engineer, and my second brother became a public school teacher. I got saved when I was 16, started going to a little Baptist church in Pekin, Illinois, and very quickly fell in love with reading the Bible and growing, and ended up going off to Bible college. I graduated from Midwestern Baptist College in 1974. It's up in Pontiac, Michigan. And I went back and became assistant pastor for a while, and then became pastor and started a Christian school and fell in love with the education part of it. Ended up teaching high school science and math for 15 years and loved it. Then I moved to Pensacola, Florida in January of '89 and began a ministry called Creation Science Evangelism, dealing with the scientific accuracy of the Bible. And I do a lot of debates against atheists, had 179 of them now. I defend the position that the Bible is scientifically accurate. It's right, just like it's written. The earth is about 6,000 years old. It's not millions of years old. Dinosaurs lived with man. They did not live millions of years ago. I now live 70 miles dead north of Pensacola. Someone gave us old gravel pit, 140 acres. And we're building Dinosaur Adventure Land, the coolest place in the world. Come on down and visit.
Yeah, that'd be great. We can get right into it. So you're known for having a young Earth view.
Depends what you mean by young. I mean, the Bible dates add up to about 6,000. If you look at the Bible, it says Adam was 130 when his son was born, and then he lived 800 years after that. You could have a lot of kids in 800 years. But if you add up the dates in Genesis 5, and then after the flood, you go to Genesis 10 and 11, but you add up those dates, the Bible clearly teaches the earth is about 6,000 years old. That's not young. That's old. It's hard to think about Abe Lincoln 150 years ago, or Columbus 500 years ago. So when people say young earth, I say, I don't know about that. 6,000 is a long time. But billions is beyond human comprehension. Nobody can even think about those kind of numbers.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't know when the term got created. It might just mean that, in the two major views, there's yours and then there's the kind of the 13.7 billion years old. It might just be a relative young Earth. Maybe the term is that way. And now it does seem to be, I think the more popular view among, current apologists is the old Earth. So that seems to be kind of the sticking point, maybe kind of a debate back and forth. So maybe just as a question, what do you think is at stake?
Well, many things. The credibility of Jesus is at stake. Jesus said in Matthew 19:4 and in Mark 10:6, Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning of the creation. Well, was it or wasn't it? Was he lying? Was he stupid? Or was he right? Because he said that was the beginning. If the earth is billions of years old, then Jesus clearly lied. So I think that's at stake. Secondly, in Romans 5 and in 1 Corinthians 15, the Bible says nothing died until Adam sinned. Man brought death into the world. So I asked those guys who call themselves old earth creationists, did anything die before Adam was here? And they'll say, oh yeah, dinosaurs, everything died. I said, well, then you got a problem if you claim to believe the Bible, because the Bible clearly teaches man brought death into the world. Evolution teaches death brought man into the world. They could not be more polar opposite. Somebody is clearly wrong. So I think that Jesus' testimony is at stake. So is the Apostle Paul. So is the clear reading of the Bible. It says in Exodus 20:11, in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth. That's in the 10 Commandments. Well, Did he do it in 6 days or not? He said he did. So I think the testimony of Moses is clearly at stake. Genesis would be wrong. Exodus would be wrong. Deuteronomy repeats the 10 Commandments. It would be wrong if the earth is billions of years old. So, yeah, I think there's a lot at stake on this simple topic of how old is the earth. There's a lot at stake right here. Okay.
So as far as Jesus's testimony being at stake, would you say that makes it a salvation issue in any sense?
No, you can believe the earth is billions of years old and still be saved, but I think you better be careful because you're calling Jesus a liar or stupid. I can't think of another way to say it. So somebody's wrong in this. And so, no, I think a lot of people are saved and don't understand this issue. It's not a salvation issue.
Right on. Yeah, the reason I asked is because it was an area where I debated a lot of people years ago in college, and I started moving away from it because I realized, well, okay, we're spending all this time debating the age of the earth and evolution, and we never get to Jesus. So I kind of started just granting, for sake of argument, I would say, okay, let's say the earth is billions of years old. It still had a beginning. It still had a creator, and I would still kind of try to use that to get past these stumbling blocks.
Right.
Do you think that's okay as a tactic?
Well, yeah. I mean, if a person wants to really get serious, they're going to have to say, okay, this book clearly teaches the earth is 6,000. Now, do I believe it or not? It's another question, but I don't think it's up for question. Does the Bible teach 6,000? The answer is a real obvious yes, it does.
And what do you think? I don't want to stay on this too long. What do you think about attempts of other people like Hugh Ross and some people to kind of look at the original Hebrew and say, well, is there something we can get from this that maybe we're missing in the translation to English?
I debated Hugh Ross for 3 hours on the John Ankerberg show. I'll be glad to do it again. He is absolute dead wrong. He's one of the nicest, friendliest heretics I've ever met, but he's a heretic. Okay, tell him I said so. The Bible clearly teaches the earth was created in 6 literal days. God said to Moses in the 10 Commandments, I want you to honor the Sabbath because in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is. That's what he said. Now, Hugh Ross says each of those days might be billions of years. Well, now you got a real problem because you got the sun, the plants made on day 3 and the sun made on day 4. How are those plants going to live for millions of years with no sun? And you got the animals and birds on day 5 and 6. They pollinate the plants, plus they exchange gases with the plants. We breathe in oxygen, give off CO2. They breathe in CO2, give off oxygen. You mean that went on for millions of years with only one of them? Somebody's going to run out of gas in this picture. So no, he's an absolute heretic in what he teaches. Very nice, kind man, but simply dead wrong on these topics.
Yeah, fair enough. So the main topic I wanted to talk with you about was dinosaurs. Because I love dinosaurs. I'm one of my favorite things to study and learn about. And so admittedly, I'll admit I go back and forth on the scientific evidence with regards to how old the universe is. I admit some days I'm feeling, okay, it's really strong in this place, other days this. But one thing that I've remained convinced on is dinosaurs, I'm not sure fit as well into into the evolutionary model, at least, as well as the evolutionists would like to claim. And I guess maybe as a kind of an initiating question, back when I was kind of, hardcore on the 6,000 years old thing, I told somebody, they asked me how old I believe the earth was. And I said, well, I think it's 6,000 years old. And they said to me, well, so you don't believe in dinosaurs? As if believing in 6,000 years old automatically disqualifies dinosaurs from your worldview.
Right.
So I guess maybe how would you respond to that person? Because I think, one thing that's important is, maybe you and I won't necessarily line up on everything as far as ages and this and that go, but I do think it's important for people to at least understand your position and how dinosaurs do fit into that worldview.
All right. If you look at Genesis chapter 5, it clearly says the people before the flood lived to be over 900 years old. Adam was 930. I mean, it can't be spelled out more clearly in Genesis chapter 5. All these dates in this chart come from that chapter. So it's also a biological fact that reptiles never stop growing. They never stop. People stop growing when they're 16 or 18. Reptiles never do that. They grow all their life. So if a reptile could live to be 800 or 900, he'd be really big. So the dinosaurs were giant lizards that lived with Adam and Eve. They probably had a different name for them because the word dinosaur wasn't made up till 1841. probably called them dragons. They're mentioned in the Bible 34 times, dragons are. There's an animal in Job 40 called behemoth, which you read the description. It sounds just like a dinosaur. Biggest animal God ever made. Got a tail like a cedar tree. Job 41 has a creature called Leviathan. I think it's probably something like a T-Rex. So, yeah, I think dinosaurs have always lived with man, probably under a different name. And there are thousands of legends of people killing dragons or things like that. I think we've really been brainwashed about the dinosaurs. They did live with Adam and Eve. They're nothing. And they were all plant eaters, according to Genesis 1:29. Everything ate plants. And people say, look at the teeth on the T-Rex. Yeah, look at the teeth on a Chinese water deer. Just Google that sometime. Chinese water deer. Got teeth like a saber-toothed tiger. It's a deer. Eats plants. Many animals that eat plants have sharp teeth. There's all kinds of monkeys that have really sharp teeth that are pure vegetarian. So I don't think you can go by that, about the teeth as a major thing. But the Bible would say nothing died till Adam sinned. Dinosaurs had to live with Adam and Eve. They were just big lizards.
Yeah, this was one of the things I often ask people. I say, like, what do you think dragons were? Because, you know, and it's really interesting subject of how kind of, because if you compare the way dragons look to dinosaurs, they're similar, but something obviously had to get distorted in the history of the images. But it really is interesting. Like, if you look at the Chinese calendar, for example, there's all these animals and a dragon, and the dragon is supposedly the only mythical one. And it's like, well, hold on, why do they have all these real animals, and then they just make up something fake to put on there?
Right. Well, Marco Polo went to China and lived there for like 12 years, I believe. And he came back and reported, this is back in the 1200s or whenever Marco Polo lived. He said the emperor in China is raising dragons to pull his chariots around in parades. Why would he report something like that? A, he's lying. B, he's stupid. Or C, it's true. So could there 800 years ago have been some dragons still alive in China? There are ancient artwork, ancient coins. All kinds of people talked about dragons. My video number 3, my video series that we've done for years, the Creation Seminar. The first one talks about the age of the earth, how to prove the earth is not billions of years old. The second one talks about the Garden of Eden. How do we know, how did they live to be 900? And the third one's all about dinosaurs. They were big lizards that lived with Adam and Eve. They've always lived with man. Noah took them on the ark, probably babies, just be sure to get a pink one and a blue one. And after the flood, people killed most of them, which is why there are so many stories of dragons. Plus, if you look after the flood, according to the Bible, the people only lived to be 400 years old for a few generations, and then it dropped off to 200 and then down to 100. So whatever happened to change the climate or whatever things changed to make people live shorter lives probably affected all the animals. And so the bigger dinosaurs simply couldn't survive in the new world after the flood. So I think most of them died either from climate change or from people hunting them and killing them all. Could be a few still alive, though. There've been an awful lot of sightings like Loch Ness Monster kind of stuff. And I got an hour's worth of stuff on that on my video number 3. People who claim they've seen them in this century.
Yeah, so maybe we can unpack some of this. So we talk about pre-flood, the atmosphere being different. What do you think the conditions were like pre-flood that allowed for, you know, a reptile to grow to be that big and be able to sustain itself with oxygen and stuff?
Well, not only the reptiles, but insects are found that are ginormous. And there's a phenomena that happens when an animal like an insect that breathes through its skin has a problem. If it gets too big, it doesn't have enough skin to supply the internal body tissue. If you look at a 1-inch cube, 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch, it has 1 cubic inch of volume, but it has 6 sides on it like a dice. So it has 6 square inches of surface. So if this was something that had to breathe through its skin, the ratio is 6 to 1. 6 inches of skin to 1 inch of body volume. If we double it to 2 inch by 2 inch by 2 inch, well, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So now you have 8 cubic inches of volume. It still has 6 sides, and each side has 4 square inches. 6 times 4 is 24. So now it's only got 3 to 1. Just by getting twice as big, it went from 6 to 1, surface area to down to 3 to 1. So any animal that has to breathe through its skin starts to get a problem if it gets too big. They're limited by how much oxygen they can absorb through their skin. Problem, surface area to volume ratio. Well, dragonflies are found with, 50-inch wingspan. 2 feet long. Centipedes are found 8 feet long to their skin. Grasshoppers 2 feet long. Cockroaches 18 inches long. How could they possibly survive? They could not survive in today's world. They couldn't even breathe, couldn't keep up with their metabolism. So I think that alone is evidence that something was vastly different. I would say before the flood, the Bible is absolutely true. There was a canopy of ice above the atmosphere. The Bible says in Genesis 1, 6, and 7, there was water above the firmament. It tells us the firmament is where the birds fly. Above the air where the birds fly. The Hebrews have always taught it was 2 or 3 fingers thick, maybe 12 inches thick, and it was crystalline ice, cold ice. Well, if the earth, get my globe here, if the earth had a canopy of, I'm shrinking here. Get my chair back up there. If you had a canopy of ice above the atmosphere, maybe 10 miles up, check the earth like a big greenhouse. It's air pressure. Today, the air at sea level is about 14.7 pounds per square inch. If you increased it 50%, breathing would be easier. Go mountain, try to run around, see how tough a time you have. You know, your lungs are not acclimated to the thinner air. All mountain climbers know that problem. So if we had greater air pressure and greater concentration of oxygen, the air bubbles that they find in amber, which is petrified tree sap, when they suck the air bubbles out and analyze them, they're 32% oxygen. So I suspect the world before the flood had 32% oxygen and greater air pressure, which would allow all animals to live longer and grow bigger, which is exactly what this fossils show us. The fossils show us that animals were ginormous. I mean, today we have sloth, a tree sloth. They find fossils of them 18 feet tall. They find fossils of rhinoceros 18 feet tall. How do you get this? So I think everybody who studies the fossils would say, look, animals were gigantic in the past. Same animals today were much bigger in the past. What does that mean? I think it means the world was different, and the Bible's right. They lived to be 900. They really did. A few animals never stopped growing. Kangaroos never stopped growing. Almost all reptiles never stop. They find fossil kangaroos 10 feet tall. How do you explain that? Here's the fossil. It's obviously a kangaroo, and it was 10 feet tall. How do you explain that? He had to live a long time, longer than they live today, and live in a world where he had enough air pressure or extra oxygen or both, where he could breathe at that size. So the Christian doesn't have a problem with any fossils that I'm aware of. There isn't really a fossil record. There's a bunch of fossils, but it's not a record. They don't talk, and there's no date on them. People put their interpretation on them. So I think the atmosphere had to be different, as well as the canopy of ice above the atmosphere would block out much of the X-rays and radiation that we now get from the sun that causes you to get, sunburn or skin cancer and things like that. That would have been blocked out by a couple inches of ice. When the fountains of the deep broke open at the beginning of the flood, the stuff would shoot up and hit that crystalline canopy and shatter it. And because super cold ice is magnetic, most of it would be drawn in and dumped on the North and South Pole. So I think the Ice Age happened at the same time, and actually because of Noah's flood. The Bible says there was water under the crust of the earth when God first made it. Psalm 24, Psalm 33, and Psalm 136, 3 testimonies, all say that the deep, the oceans, was inside the earth. Probably 10 miles down, inside the crust, were huge pockets of water. That came shooting to the surface when the flood started, when the fountains of the deep broke open. If there was water under the crust, and that water came shooting up to the top, it would launch stuff into space with the pressure of 10 miles of rock on top of it, and would shatter this canopy overhead, and then the crust would sink in a few hundred feet. The earth is spinning, but if the earth shrank in a few hundred feet, not much, it would speed up a little bit. When ice skaters, when they're spinning, they pull their arms in tight, they spin faster. Or if you're diving and you're tucking for a dive, you tuck tighter, you dive faster or spin faster. So I think the earth probably had 360 days per year, original creation, and now it has 365.2422. So it has sped up probably because of Noah's flood. But the water for the flood came from inside. A little bit came from rain. It rained for 40 days, but the water kept coming up for 150 days. It was not all coming from rain. So those are some of the things that changed. The canopy that was overhead is now gone. It's dumped on the poles, which is why we have an ice age. Huge ice caps at the north and south pole. It used to go clear down to Kansas City, Missouri. It's now melted back. The ice has melted back from Kansas City, where it stopped. It's melted back up now to the polar ice caps. Well, if you melt all that ice, it's going to fill the oceans a couple hundred feet. The oceans have two very distinct parts to them. Anybody studies oceanography will tell you, you can walk off the coast of eastern United States for 300 miles, and it never gets over 100 feet deep. And all of a sudden, it drops off to 12,000 feet deep. That's called the continental shelf. Why would there be a continental shelf? Well, that used to be the beach line. I think right after the flood, the oceans were smaller, the continents were bigger, all connected. While you could walk to Australia, it was all connected. And that water around Indonesia is only 30 feet deep, from here to the corner of the room back there. So then as the ice melted, it would take a few hundred years for that to happen. The ice would melt back, raise the ocean level, and now you can't walk to Australia anymore. So people say, how did kangaroos get to Australia? Well, they hopped. That's how they get everywhere. And then they got trapped as the water was coming up. Now they're isolated. So I don't think there's anything in biology or geography that the Christian cannot explain with a simple literal reading of God's word. Okay?
Yeah, no, that's great. My next question is going to be about some of the historical evidence you talk about of humans coexisting with dinosaurs. You've talked in your seminars about things like the Ica stones and different, and you touched on earlier kind of legends of dragons. Do you think you could unpack some of that a little bit?
Well, down in Peru, there was a civilization back around 300 BC that lasted until about, I think, 700 AD. They were called Ica, I-C-A. After them came the Inca, I-N-C-A. So the Ica civilization lasted about 1,000 years in Peru. They drew the lines on the desert that you see out there, the Nazca burial lines and all that stuff. But Dennis Swift spoke at our conference here last month. He's probably the world's expert on the Ica stones. They found in the graves down there in this desert, over 50,000 stones have been found with all kinds of strange things carved on them, including dinosaurs living with people. So yeah, go Google, watch my video number 3. I show pictures of them right there. The Ica stones from Ica, Peru. Yeah, I think that's just one of hundreds of pieces of evidence that show man lived with dinosaurs. If you watch my video 3, I go through a ton of stuff on there of evidence that man and dinosaurs lived at the same time.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things I think was in your seminar was drawn on the dinosaurs were kind of these circle patterns. And
Right.
people kind of said, oh, well, why would they do that? And then it turned out when we discovered, some fossilized dinosaur flesh, it was like, oh, look, the scales are in circle patterns. Huh, what about that?
Well, I think it's interesting. They had to see a live one to know that, because when you find fossils, it's extremely rare to find skin or tissue. It's almost always just bones. But the dinosaur skin that was found in 1998, I think it was Brazil, fossilized dinosaur skin did have circle patterns on it. Now, many alligators and crocodiles, they lay out in the sun to get warm. They've got spots on their back for the sun to heat up, a heat sink. I think that's probably what it was, something to heat up the creature, to absorb heat quickly. The circles might have been, I don't know. But they knew when they made the Ica stones, they knew to put those circles on. So I think they had to see a live one.
Yeah, and so maybe now we can kind of transition into evolution. So, the modern theory is that birds are modern day dinosaurs. And one of the things that's always confused me is, okay, even if, I grant of the whole theory of macroevolution and all of that, why not think just that today's reptiles, lizards, and alligators and all this stuff are the modern day dinosaurs, because they're much closer to what they were? Why think that dinosaurs were closer to birds now than they were to reptiles back then?
That blows my mind. I did a whole series on my YouTube channel the last couple of days responding to R and Ra about dinosaurs are birds. That's got to be one of the dumbest ideas in the history of humanity. Where do you start? Watch my YouTube series, Ken Hovind Official, Dinosaurs Are Birds. That probably the last 4 or 5 out of the last 7 broadcasts have been on that topic. No, dinosaurs did not turn to birds. God created birds and God created animals separately, though nobody's ever seen any animal produce a baby other than its same kind. It's never been seen. Dogs produce dogs, birds produce birds, cows produce cows. There are no exceptions, none. So if somebody wishes to believe, capital B, believe, that it was different long ago and far away, well, I don't care what they believe, but that's not science. Science tells us dogs produce dogs, birds produce birds, no exceptions. So if they want you to believe, dinosaurs slowly turn into birds. I think it's extremely stupid to believe such a thing. Somebody, somewhere who made up that lie is laughing at everybody for believing it. They probably did it as a joke just to see if people are dumb enough to swallow it. And sure enough, they did. They swallowed it.
Yeah, well, I just find it funny because, again, even if I were to grant evolution to the person I'm talking with, I could maybe buy that they had a common ancestor, like reptiles and birds have a common ancestor. I can maybe buy into, the tree and how it starts off and branches out. But to think directly, okay, you have dinosaurs at this particular point, and then it's a direct line from them to birds, as opposed to a direct line to modern day reptiles like alligators and lizards and that kind of stuff. It's just, I think it's just taken too far.
It is so ridiculous. Hold on one second. Hey, Tim, Jeff is waiting for the loaded lumber on the trailer. You drive the van down, unload it, and drive it back. Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that, brother. I was late coming from the lumber yard, and he's waiting on that lumber. So
that's okay. I appreciate it. Now I do want to ask you: Are you familiar with Stephen Meyer's work and the ID?
I have seen some of it. I'm not part of that group. I think what they're doing is good. I think they're allies. They're on the right side. They don't take it near far enough. They think there must be an intelligent designer. Okay, I know who it is. I know his name. He's my savior. So I go way beyond just there is one. I know him personally. That's Jesus Christ. He's the designer of everything.
Well, yeah, Stephen Meyer is a Christian.
Right.
I was just curious because because a lot of the stuff in your presentations is great, and then some of the stuff they have with talking about information. I didn't know if you're familiar with that kind of stuff. Right on. So well, I had a question there, and it just completely left my mind. I apologize. Oh, okay. Here's a question I can ask you. So, one of the things you talk about, one of your seminars, is lies in the textbooks, and it's one of the things that kind of where the other side helped convince me that they themselves were wrong. It wasn't just that I went to guys like you and Stephen Meyer and got convinced that evolution was wrong. It was the people advocating the macroevolution theory that kind of convinced me. And
Right.
One of the things is, okay, well, if that theory is true, if it's so solid, if it's so, if it's not even a debate in science, okay, why can't you admit, okay, these things we did use as evidence, that's wrong, but here we have all this new stuff that's evidence. Why are these still all these things that are clearly wrong? I took a biology in class not too long ago, and they still had Ernst Haeckel's drawings of the embryos that were proven fake.
Yeah. Proven wrong in 1874. 1874. I think they're way behind if they're still teaching that.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you make of all that? Why is that like the only evidence they have, and that's why they use it, or is
That's
it?
why they use it. That's all they've got. I did a book on it called "Are You Being Brainwashed by Your Science Book?" You can get this on our ministry at 855 Big Dino extension 1. I have a video series "Lies in the Textbooks." This is video number 4 of my series. It's an important topic to me, teaching high school science 15 years. There are 75 basic lies in the textbooks that they keep in there because that's their evidence for evolution. For a group one time, and I mentioned about they were selecting textbooks for Arkansas, and I went through 30 some lies in the textbooks, like Ernst Haeckel's gill slits. And when I got done sharing all the lies in the textbooks, this woman from the ACLU, the American Communist Lawyers Union, she got up and she said, "Now, folks, you want to take all this stuff out of the textbook, what are you going to replace it with?" I said, "Hold it. You're saying we can't take lies out of the books unless I find a replacement." That's what you're saying. This is the stuff you have for evidence for evolution. I would like to take it out because it's a lie, which leaves no evidence for evolution. Well, that sounds like your problem, not my problem. I don't have evidence for your theory. I don't believe your theory. I think your theory is dumb. Go find some more evidence. If there's any evidence for evolution, then please show it. But there isn't any. That's why they keep the lies in the textbooks, because that's all they've got. Nothing else. The whole theory is supported by nothing but lies.
Yeah, it's funny. And this is a tangent, but it's one of the things I've recently realized about just American history from reading Dinesh D'Souza, how much stuff that we take for granted, certain things like the party switch and other things, and you find out, oh, it's not true. How did all this stuff get propagated? It just goes to show the power of, if people are who are in control of textbooks and then they just go unchecked, people just kind of.
I think it's a bigger picture than that. There are some people who would like to have a one world government, a new world order, Pinky in the brain, take over the world. This has always been the case. It started with Nimrod right after the flood in Genesis chapter 11. He wanted to take over the world and one world government. There's always been people who want this. In order to do that, they have to get people thinking that rights come from government. You have the right to breathe. You have the right to drink water. You have the right to get married. You have the right to drive a car. Which of those rights do you have to buy from the government, and which rights did you get from God? The founders of this country back in 1776 threw the tea in the harbor. They made a declaration. They said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain rights. Whoa. If you get a bunch of guys who believe they have rights that come from God, you get a bunch of them together, they're going to throw the tea in the harbor and start a big war. So those who would like a one world government, a new world order, they can't afford to have people thinking, you have rights that come from God, not government. That becomes dangerous. So those who would like a one world government, a new world order, people like me are a threat to their plans, their Pinky in the brain plans. So I can understand why they hate me, because they work for Satan. He's a liar and he's the father of lies. And that's all they do is use lies to support their theory. I tell them, look, if you've got some evidence for evolution, I'd like to see it. But nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog, period. End of story. It's never been done. If you want to believe it, okay, believe what you want, but it's not science. And I resent paying for their religion to be taught in our school system. They should go start a private school and teach evolution to anybody that wants to pay and come learn it. But it does not belong in the public school system at taxpayer expense.
Yeah, so what would you say to this argument? Because, I mean, here's the thing. As you and I both agree that microevolution is real. And it's actually, there's quite a lot that microevolution can do. There's quite a lot of variation. There's quite a lot of, mutative power that can occur within there, to allow certain animals to live in many different environments and throughout different times and adapt and all this. So it's really a powerful force. I don't see the necessary step to go beyond that and need macro evolution.
Yeah, you have to define the term evolution when you're going to get into a debate on it. I don't like the word microevolution. I think that gives them some false credibility. It's just a variation within the same kind. Well, there's 339 recognized breeds of dogs in America, American Kennel Association. They have from the Chihuahua to the Great Dane and a bunch of stuff in between. Okay, it's still a dog. Everybody knows it's still a dog. A 4-year-old can point at it and call it dog, okay? So that's not evolution. It's a variation of the same kind. It all goes back to terminology. The Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. So they call it microevolution, and then they think that will add up to macroevolution, which is silly. How many times would you have to roll a pair of dice to get a 7? Well, you're probably likely to get a 7 once in a while. How many times do you have to roll the dice to get a 13? Never. It's never going to happen, right? You can't get enough to add up to 13. So these variations we see within the kind are never going to add up to a new kind of animal. Now, they can believe that if they want. I don't care. They've got great faith, and they do believe it. But it's not science, and they should admit it. They should admit they have a religion, and they should charge tuition to come pay tuition to come learn whatever they want to teach them. Go start a private school and teach evolution. Got no business being involved in the public school, though. So I think we're making a mistake by using the term microevolution, but we're kind of stuck there right now. That's a battle we'll fight another day. Microevolution happens, variations, but they're limited, and it does not ever add up to anything what we call macroevolution. It just doesn't happen. They're dreaming.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question is how would you respond to somebody who says macroevolution just is microevolution, just over a longer period of time? And one of the ways I had it explained to me once by an evolutionist was okay, you can look at a bunch of different dogs and say you got a Chihuahua, you got a Pug, and you got a Great Dane. And yeah, okay, they're all three dogs, right? But you can see there is a wide variant in their shape, their size, kind of how they look. And then you look at, say, a cow and a horse. And a cow and a horse, they have the same basic thing. They have 2 ears, they got 4 legs, they kind of got a similarly shaped nose. And one could argue, oh, maybe they even, if we're just going by looks, they kind of look more similarly shaped than some of the varieties you see in dogs. And so just as we can say, okay, maybe the Pug, the Chihuahua, and the Great Dane kind of going back had a common ancestor, the horse and the cow have very similar features. Maybe going back, they had kind of a common ancestor.
Well, I say they're welcome to believe anything they'd like, but it's not observed. Cows make baby cows. Horses make baby horses. There are no exceptions to that. And there are quite a few differences between horses and cows. Cows have 2 hooves, horses have 1. So there are a lot of differences besides that. An anatomy expert could tell you all that. But still, it's not observed. It's never been seen for a cow to produce anything but a cow. So I say, look, welcome to your religion, but please call it a religion, admit it. Quit calling it science. It's not. That drives them crazy.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the reasons I really like Stephen Meyer's work, is because when he gets into stuff like the epigenetic information, it's like, well, no, these are essentially different animals, and they, horses and cows may look similar, but there really is a different body plan there, and so it's not even just a matter of mutating DNA at that point.
I think you could look at the Olympic records for, let's take the 1 mile run. I don't know what the Olympic record was for running a mile back in 1944, but I bet it's dropped down. I bet they've gotten faster. I bet athletes have trained harder, and I bet let's say they've gone from 4.5 minutes down to 4 minutes or less on the 1 mile run. Wow. So we could say, okay, over 60 years, they've dropped off 30 seconds, just to pick a number. Does that mean they're going to eventually get down to 0 and run the mile in 0 flat? Or is there a limit? Watching these micro changes and then assuming that there's no limit to it is where the problem is. I agree. People have been trying to get faster and faster cars. They develop cars that run faster. The quarter mile record now is like 350 miles an hour or something in the quarter mile, from 0 to 350. Okay, do you think they'll ever get to instantly, where they go bang, bang, and they're instantly at the quarter mile line? No, they're not going to get instantly. There is a limit of some kind. We see changes in dogs. They've gotten smaller dogs down to the Chihuahua. Okay, is there a limit? Do you think they'll ever get a dog as small as a flea?
No, not likely.
There are living life forms as small as a flea, like a flea.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, it's possible to live at that scale. Will they ever get a dog as small as a pygmy mouse? Pygmy mouse is a mammal. Dog is a mammal. But you're never going to get a dog as small as a mouse, pygmy mouse. There's a limit somewhere. So that's what the evolutionists cannot afford to admit. There's a limit. Yes, we see changes, but they're limited. Oh, they don't want that.
Yeah, well, they just say, well, if you give it enough time.
Well, that's why it's their religion. Time answers everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the way Frank Turk put it once. He was talking about it, and he was given a PowerPoint presentation, and he was showing all the genetic limits that dog breeders hit when they're trying to breed new dogs. And he just asked the question. He said, why would somebody think that natural forces, that impersonal forces, can do what all of our intelligence can't do?
We can't even make it happen, let alone let it happen. Brother, I apologize for starting late. I'm running up against the clock here. How long is this program supposed to be? We started late. Can we do it?
That's okay. If you gotta go, we can wrap it up.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I'm honored. I have anybody call if they have any questions. 855-BIG-DINO. That's right. Big Dino. I'm extension 3. They can talk to me. I can take calls all day long. Okay. 2, schedule a program, or extension 1 to get my videos. And what are you in Maryland?
I'm sorry?
You're in Maryland, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard you got some heathen up in that state. Why don't you go get them all converted?
Oh, I'm trying to get
Okay, good.
Get everybody going. Everybody go check out the website, drdino.com. Can you order your DVD set there?
Yep, you can order them right on there. And my DVDs, you can buy them, take them home, copy them, send them back, and get your money back.
Well, that's very generous. Yeah, and I think you can catch them all on YouTube too. If you just go on YouTube and look up Kent Hovind Seminar 1, 2, 3, there's 7 of them, if I'm correct.
We're trying to get war, build a castle around here. So
yeah, the YouTube channel is Kent Hovind Official. You can follow him on Twitter at Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind, thanks so much for being here, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
thank you, brother. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.